enjoyed reading 1984 and you're looking for some other dystopian books to pick up that are similar, I have a list of 3 to share with you today. If you particularly like 1984 and you're looking for some of the similar qualities, I'll talk about these book recommendations as well as how they're similar to 1984 so you can decide whether you want to pick them up for yourself. Let's get straight in and take a look. The first of these dystopian novels is one that I really enjoy. I have already read and reread, and it's the kind of book I'm going to go back to again and again. I'm talking about Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale is a little bit different from 1984, but it does have its similarities. So this book is more centered around women's rights as opposed to anything. If you're unfamiliar, the premise of this society is that the ability of women to reproduce in society has fallen down drastically. And in order to kind of combat that, women who are able to have children have effectively been enslaved, and they are enslaved to elite families so that the husbands can procreate with these women in order to give birth to elite children. So that sounds quite different, doesn't it? However, it does have its similarities with 1984. So one of the main drivers of the society in 1984 is about kind of controlling relationships. In particular, there are committees and societies around deciding who can effectively marry in the parties and ultimately decide if they deem the match worthy. But not only that, like, matches aren't really romantic. They are designed to be productive, to allow the couples to have children so that they can grow up, support the party. So it's very much a rigorously controlled, but also like not encouraging emotional depth in these relationships at all. And that is obviously going to be very much the case in The Handmaid's Tale. What slave is going to enjoy effectively being, I've got to choose my words carefully because I don't want this video censored, but being forced to procreate with somebody of not their choosing. You know, it's the same kind of thing, maybe a little bit more extreme, but we have this complete lack of emotional depth in relationships in common. On a more kind of mundane route, the societies in 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale are very different from kind of what we have now. They are dictated by a similar kind of like lower class and more elite class, but what the roles of these people are quite different. So in The Handmaid's Tale, the elite are probably more traditionally like they are now. They are the rich, they are the controlling powers that be. But in 1984, things look very different because it's a very socialist kind of society where everyone has the same. So we seem to get rid of that, if you like, on certain levels, but there are still classes, if you like, within 1984. So Winston quite frequently refers to people known as the proles, and they are like a lower caste society. They're like they're not in the party that Winston is affiliated with. They have no control at all. And to be honest, largely they are kind of left alone. They're deemed to be insignificant enough that they're not really bothered with. So whilst things look very kind of one level in 1984, actually that's not the case at all. So we still have this element of classism and where power sits and all that kind of thing. So whereas I have mentioned before that 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale deal with kind of childbearing and procreation, the idea of a lack of emotional depth in relationships behind 1984 is so that characters can't effectively develop allegiances and start taking up personal views against the party. The Handmaid's Tale is very different. It's kind of a more productive kind of level, and it's because of the ability of women to have children declining generally in society. This doesn't happen in 1984, but it is still somewhat controlled. The next book on my list of books, if you enjoyed reading 1984, is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Now, this is quite different to The Handmaid's Tale, but again, this book does have its similarities with 1984. So hopefully any of the books I feature in this video will suit you for one reason or another. Fahrenheit 451 is about a fireman called Montag who is tasked with effectively destroying books and the homes of people who are effectively not conforming with the society aim. What is that aim? That's to effectively discourage any kind of deep thought or people thinking for themselves, and instead to kind of suck in a very superficial level kind of entertainment. Now that may feel a little bit close to home. This book mainly goes down the route of television. It was written in the 1950s, I believe, so not too far wrong, but obviously with the inclusion now of social media and other kind of forms of content, especially social media, I think we all are known for doom scrolling and, spending a lot of time on social media just whizzing through. It feels quite accurate, actually. It's quite scary. So what this society is about is effectively discouraging people thinking for themselves so they don't kind of challenge the status quo. Now that is very much kind of true for 1984 as well. And another kind of tie-in with these two books is that people are encouraged to effectively turn in people who don't conform. So 1984 has different committees and things like that. They have the thought police. People feel like they're actively kind of trying to be caught out by people. But obviously, like, friends and family can effectively dob in anyone they think isn't being conformist with these rules. And that's the same of Fahrenheit 451. In fact, the protagonist finds this happening to himself. He doesn't necessarily conform to the ideal society. I'm trying not to spoil this. And it's those close to him that catch on, kind of thing. So that is very much similar between these two books. Another similarity between Fahrenheit 451 and 1984 is that the controlling powers that be alter information available to the general public in order to suit their own agendas. Now, this is very much the case in 1984. In particular, we are following a protagonist called Winston, who works in the department that deals with this. So he is actively altering information in order to make historic publications meet, current expectations, if you like. So documents are altered to change who the kind of countries or whatever are at war with to always match who it is currently. But things like quotas, rations, anything like that seems contradictory is taken out, so the party can't be criticised. So they're actively always altering the past. This is very much prevalent in this book, and the same is true of Fahrenheit 451. The last book I'm featuring on this list is one I actually read pretty recently. I wasn't really kind of aware of this book until it was mentioned to me by somebody who attends our work book club, and that book is The Giver by Lois Lowry. Now, I really enjoyed this book, and it's different from 1984 in that The Giver is targeted at a more young adult audience, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have mature themes. So this setting, dystopian world, is about kind of setting up what's deemed to be like an ideal society. It's a set size. People are prescribed their partners, their jobs, their roles in life, even down to like gifts given to kids as birthdays. And they are given set responsibilities at set ages. So it's all very prescribed. So much is kind of similar in 1984. Again, I've already talked about, partners being heavily vetoed, vetted, and controlled. And that is very much also true in The Giver. but that's not the only thing they have in common. As well as kind of limiting the emotional depth of relationships and, generally speaking, just the whole society. That's the point of this thing. Albeit under the scenes, there's definitely a lot more going on that doesn't necessarily reflect that. And maybe people don't appreciate that because they're not informed. But actually, it's far from this ideal society that it's made out to be. It's not infrequent for characters, particularly like older characters, they basically disappear. I'm not going to spoil what happens to them, but in terms of what the society believe, they just go away and don't know what happens to them, but they don't really challenge this idea either, which is scary, really. And this is much the same in 1984. People are, they're referred to as unpersons at the end. I'm sure you can probably guess kind of what happens there. But it's not uncommon for people to just disappear without explanation, and people are just expected to suck this up and accept it. And the other similarity with The Giver and 1984 is that the children are kind of brought in really early to effectively indoctrinate them into this society. So, as I mentioned in The Giver, kids are given gifts at certain ages. There's a particular age children are given bikes in order so they can transport themselves around. And once they get to that point, they're kind of expected to help take part in caregiving for the elderly, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But they are effectively given these roles early to indoctrinate that is their position. This is how our society looks. When you get to this age, you are expected to look after them. And obviously, conversely, when you get to that age, you are then almost like a burden to society. So it's very, very scripted, but kids are brought in very early to bring them into this lifestyle before they've really got a chance to challenge it and ask questions. It's just expected that they get on with it. There are lots of great dystopian books, and obviously I can only feature a few that I've read. Are there any books like 1984 that I've not mentioned in this video? If so, drop a note in the comments to tell me about it, and if I haven't read it, I'd love to pick it up for myself. I'm rereading 1984 and then a spin-off retelling of Julia as part of my March TBR, so I will be reviewing this base 1984 book as well as Julia on my channel in due course. I hope you're interested to hear about those as much as you were excited to try some of the books I've featured in this video if you haven't already. And until next time, I will see you around.